We heard all sorts of urban legends all the time during our childhoods. Sometimes those legends aren't exactly true to a T, but they're very much based in reality. Sometimes, such as in the instance of today's topic, it happens a lot more often than you might think. Here's an urban legend that spread like wildfire in the 1990s and early 2000s, one that took chain letters and the early days of the internet by storm. It was a topic that many people were already pretty concerned with. Being a while into the AIDS epidemic and fresh out of what was probably the biggest portion of the panic, people began to wonder, what if there are people out there who have AIDS, know they have AIDS, and are intentionally using that to infect others? Well, that's when this story came about. Here's word for word how the story was usually spread. Quote, "A guy's friends throw him a 21st birthday party. They get him drunk and then a hotel room and a prostitute for his present. In the morning, when this guy wakes up, the prostitute is gone. When he goes to the bathroom, written on the mirror with lipstick is, 'Welcome to the world of AIDS.'" While there is no proof out there that a crime took place in that exact same manner, especially the writing on the bathroom wall, there are a lot out there that are eerily similar, even some where the criminals will convey the message in, while it's not quite on writing on a bathroom mirror, very similar ways. When searching for the details of the crime, the first case to pop up is one with this headline: "Tennessee woman gets 26 years for exposing sex partners to HIV." The article, which is actually on a medical website, reads exactly as this. AIDS, name removed. A Tennessee woman who claims she had as many as 50 one-night stands in response to contracting HIV from her boyfriend was sentenced to 26 years in prison. She pleaded guilty to 22 counts of knowingly and without consent exposing her partners to HIV through unprotected sex. This is a Class C felony. However, at her sentencing, name removed, changed her story. She then claimed to have sex with only 18 men and denied exposing them intentionally, saying that she had warned each of them that she was HIV positive. 5 of the 7 men named in her indictment denied that they had been informed of name removed HIV status. The case began when one of the men tested positive for HIV. While it is true that the perpetrator's name is redacted in this article, that isn't true across the board. Searching for these specific details brings us to the first subject of today's video, and that first subject would take us down a rabbit hole that would lead to many more. Pamela Weiser. In the 1990s, Pamela Weiser had gotten divorced and decided to find herself a new boyfriend. In doing so, she ended up getting herself a guy who was HIV positive and contracted the virus herself. She wanted to get revenge. Not necessarily only on her ex-boyfriend, but on all men and society in general, hoping to spread the virus to as many people as possible, causing a snowball effect that would surely go out of control. Pamela started going out to bars in rural communities and meeting as many men as she could, easily scoring one-night stands with a large portion of them. It's believed that she slept with as many as 50 men in this matter, possibly even more, to the point where she didn't even remember the names of all of them. Some people around town somehow came to find out what she was up to, such as the worker of a local economy inn lodge in Lewisburg. Pam came in about once a week over a period of several months, each time with a different man, always having the men pay for her. The hotel worker said, "We knew she had HIV and even warned people who were in the hotel. Don't get a hold of her, she's dangerous. I am terribly hurt that anything like this would happen in this town, because it's a church-going town." Eventually, some of these men started finding out that they were infected themselves. It wasn't too long before Pamela was being investigated, as people in town were talking about her little revenge plot. She was arrested and taken into custody. At first, she downplayed the situation, saying that she had actually slept with very few men and they all knew of her condition and didn't care. Finding this very unbelievable, the police would press her for the real story. Although her story would change at least 5 times throughout the legal process, she would finally admit to wrongdoing, saying from the Marshall County Jail, "I was just getting revenge for what he did to me. I feel I've gotten my revenge." She was charged with 2 counts of criminal exposure to HIV, a law that was relatively new and was being investigated for many more. Since 1994, a state law had made it a felony to knowingly expose another person to HIV, even if they actually didn't contract the virus. After the department started to urge local men to get tested, they got a whopping 80 calls from concerned men within the first 24 hours. The police said, "We don't know who they are. Some we have first names, some we have no names." During the trial, 5 of the 7 men who chose to testify against her had said that she didn't inform them of her condition when they did the deed. 1 of the 7 men had since tested positive for HIV. After a long trial, Pamela went on to plead guilty to 72 counts of knowingly exposing these men to HIV. She did her best to apologize to the men, and by proxy even more people, saying that she had infected them with the virus. "I didn't know what I was thinking. I had a lot on my mind," she said. Ultimately, Pamela was sentenced to 26.5 years in prison for what she had done, but she was far from the only person out there doing these things. Daryl Bossman McGee. While Pamela's case may have involved a lot of malice, plenty of other cases out there involved nothing but apathy, which one might argue might be even worse. Knowing that they had the disease and without any intention of giving it to other people, they just simply didn't care if they did and continued sleeping with others regardless. Well, that's where this individual comes in. Daryl McGee, who ended up with the moniker Bossman despite his haggard appearance, somehow had a way with women. Well, not specifically only women, but also girls. Over a period of 2 years since finding out that he had HIV, he knowingly slept with at the very least 61 women and girls, all ranging in age from 22 to as young as 12. Daryl knew where to pick up girls, younger girls in particular. He would often hang out at the skating rink or near the local middle school, smiling and waving at any girls who would walk by. His antics were pretty well known around the area of East St. Louis where he lived. Little did they know, this familiar, smiling, and waving man wasn't only a murderer, he was potentially a mass murderer. Daryl had an eye for finding girls who were more insecure and alone than their peers. He would prey on them by giving them small gifts and telling them how pretty they were, much prettier than the girls around them. When he won them over by being the only man in their life to treat them that well, he would take them away and have his way with them. Over a period of only a few years, he made his way with well over 60 girls this way. One after one, these girls were lured into his trap, used, and dumped. But of course, even worse than that, many of them soon came to find that they were diagnosed with HIV. As hard as it is to believe, it got even worse. Many of them were actually pregnant as well, with at least one of them giving birth to an HIV-positive baby. Well, the law would never have a chance to figure out the true scope of what Daryl had done. One day, while Daryl was driving around with one of his new victims on the streets of St. Louis, a man nearby waved at him to stop his car. Once he did, sensing something was up, the potential young victim left the car and fled. That was when the mystery man came up to Daryl's driver's side window, pulled up a .45, and shot him in the torso at point-blank range. The police had no suspects, but they assumed it was likely a revenge murder. With as many victims as he had, and all of the people potentially connected to those victims, they had an ocean of possible grudges against him to deal with. Nan Williams. Nan Williams is a man who is often compared with Daryl McGee for very understandable reasons. While we don't know a lot about Daryl's early life, we do know quite a bit about Nan's upbringing. Nan was born in Brooklyn and had led a life of crime since his early childhood. His mother was a drug addict, giving him experience with all sorts of substances early on. He would often rob the elderly, sometimes scoring some pills in the process, and would deal them himself. He had multiple convictions for different street crimes under different aliases by the time he was in his late teens. Nan soon grew into a fledgling crack dealer, often bragging of his gang-related activities to anyone who would listen. Not only that, but he was violent with women, something that was very well known and still managed to get more girls regardless. It was said that his confident demeanor would often win in girls of, quote, all races and socioeconomic classes, although it was noted that most of the girls he hooked up with had some sorts of problems with drugs, money, or mental health. Much like Daryl, many women have stated that it was Nan's ability to make them feel special and loved that won them over, even while his violent personality was well known and sometimes even shown to them outright. Not only that, he was persistent, pushing for a relationship with one of his 13-year-old victims over a period of months. In 1996, Nishan was diagnosed with HIV. He later claimed that he simply didn't believe the health officials who told him this, but it seems more likely that he just didn't care, as he never bothered to get any sort of follow-up despite such a grave diagnosis. He continued his life as normal, being arrested on various other charges along the way. In Chautauqua County, it was soon found that he was the primary cause behind what they called an HIV microepidemic. When the police closed in on him, he was eventually charged with 2 counts of statutory and 1 count of reckless endangerment due to both having HIV and hooking up with underage girls. He received a 4 to 12-year sentence for these charges. Shortly after, it was found that 2 of his sons were born infected with HIV. Not only that, the women who fathered these kids went on to get new relationships shortly after, unknowingly giving the virus to their new boyfriends as well. And some of these women even continued to sleep with different men after their diagnosis was known. An additional 10 women he slept with were found to be positive. It can't be known exactly how many victims out there that there were, or how many spread the disease to each other afterwards. In April of 2010, it came time for Nishan's 12-year prison sentence to end. However, a New York Attorney General blocked his release, opting instead to keep him confined under a new statute aimed at sex offenders. While his lawyers continued to argue that he was the victim of a false positive test initially, it didn't matter. As of the making of this video, he remains confined. Sarah Jane Porter. Sarah Jane Porter was a 43-year-old woman in the UK who contracted HIV in the 1990s. Given that she contracted the disease from the only black man she had ever slept with, she became outraged and set her sights on getting revenge against all of the black men that she could. Being the receptionist at a hair salon, she was able to meet all sorts of men easily in her day-to-day life. Either meeting men through work or at nightclubs, she eventually had an untold number of one-night stands with men from all over the country. With one man, she even entered into a relationship with him for a whole 2 years, keeping her condition a secret from him the entire time. At least 3 other men at the time were known to have slept with her conclusively. Sarah's boyfriend, feeling ill, eventually came to find that he had contracted the disease and tested positive. Given that Sarah had been the only woman he had slept with, he felt it couldn't have been anyone else. Sarah at first attempted to gaslight the man into thinking that the opposite had happened, telling him that he must have given the disease to her. At first, he attempted to take his own life. This was when he ran into an ex of hers, an ex who had also come to find that he was HIV positive. This was when the pieces fell together. He described her as pure evil, saying, "Her cruelty and dishonesty made me feel so worthless." The 3 other men who were known to have slept with her came forward, each getting tested and luckily coming to find out that they were negative. This was only the tip of the iceberg, though. The police launched an investigation against Sarah, going back to her apartment and getting all manner of evidence as to her communications, finding out about what relationships they could. While being interviewed by the police, Sarah refused to answer any questions at all about her dating history. She refused to help any of the men who may have been infected by her. The police were forced to try and trace her steps nationwide in order to find anyone she may have been with. Her boyfriend was a DJ, and she attended many of his music-related events and festivals over the years. The amount of possible victims was staggering. It was actually her own friends that came forward to say that she had a vendetta against black men because she felt that they were responsible for her disease. Sarah was arrested. In court, she broke down crying, saying that she felt bad about what she had done to her partner. Psychologists made the claim that she was in denial about having the disease and what significance it carried, but this contradicted her previous claims of wanting revenge. Sarah's case was the first of a woman in the UK being charged and jailed for willingly passing the virus on. The judge said, "Your victim was devastated that a person whom he loved and respected, you, had lied to him time and time again by your words and actions. A custodial sentence is quite inevitable, and the court sees no grounds whatsoever that the sentence should be suspended." She was sentenced to 32 months in prison, of which she only served about half. It was only after the sentencing that it was revealed that she was possibly connected to over 1,000 men during the time period she was spreading the disease. Detectives said, "She has completely ruined their lives. She has put some of them through an incomprehensible experience. Porter has never answered one question despite our appeals to her. That is callous. I gave her opportunities and interviews to help us help other people. They were very articulate, professional, decent men who were trying to do their best in life. It turns out Sarah had a young son who was left to see the monster that his mother had become. Daryl Row. Now, this is a story that I've held back because I feel that it has the most similarities to the original urban legend, and in a bid to remain spoiler-free, we'll get exactly as to why in just a few moments. Daryl Row, a 26-year-old man, was a British hairdresser. He was originally from Edinburgh, Scotland, where he was diagnosed with HIV in April of 2015. It was after that he moved to Brighton in England. There he met 8 men over the Grindr app and slept with them, knowingly having the disease. Afterwards, he moved to northeast England and met 2 more men in the same way. It was here that his escapades most closely came to resemble the original urban legends years after the fact, as Daryl came to taunt his victims with eerily similar messages. While he didn't go through with writing the message out on a bathroom mirror, he used modern technology to his advantage and merely texted them. He took pleasure in toying with them after the fact, leaving messages such as, "I have HIV, lol, whoops," before blocking them. To another, he said, "Maybe you have the fever 'cause I came inside you and I have HIV, lol, whoops." This man called him back, and Daryl simply laughed at him over the phone and made fun of him even further. This victim then later tested positive for HIV. With other men, he did use protection, but he maliciously cut the ends off of the rubber to completely defeat the purpose. The police were notified, given that this act was clearly malicious. It was then that they came to fully believe that this was a calculated plan to spread the disease as much as he could. Afterwards, yet another man came forward after being diagnosed. The police said, "With full knowledge, putting others at risk, he embarked on what was a cynical and deliberate campaign to infect other men with the HIV virus. Unfortunately, for some of the men he met, his campaign was successful. At least 4 have contracted the virus. Others were lucky not to. In all cases, it was his intention to infect those men with HIV. The police were able to find and arrest Daryl in February of 2016. He refused to admit being HIV positive and denied meeting with the infected men. He was bailed out of jail and fled back home. When more victims came forward, he was brought back into custody once again, but once more he was bailed. This time he went missing and the police had to launch a manhunt to even find him. After not too long, he was found living in Wallsend under a pseudonym. In his trial, Daryl expressed that he felt that he had cured himself of HIV by taking homeopathic remedies and drinking his own urine as a treatment. But given his text messages, it appears that he was well aware he wasn't cured. In court, Daryl was told by one of the 10 known victims by this point, "I would rather he had murdered me than left me to live my life like this." Another victim said, "As long as he has strength in his body, he will be a risk. He is a menace to society. He is a sociopath because I don't think he has any regard for other people's feelings." A third victim told the courts of how he had attempted to end his own life after hearing the news. He said, "A part of me died that day when I was diagnosed. The old me is no longer. The new me is constantly sad, thinking about how my life changed. I have been devastated by Row's actions, but I want to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else." The judge said that Daryl would be the first person to be sentenced for grievous bodily harm under these circumstances. After a 6-week trial, he was sentenced to life in prison. At a bare minimum, he was told that he would have to serve at least 12 years of that sentence. Brandy Yaka. Lastly, I have one more honorable mention from recent years that proves that the fear that something like this might happen is very much alive and well. This is after a video was uploaded to Facebook in August of 2019 that would very soon go viral. In this video uploaded to social media, a woman named Brandy Yaka went on an unhinged rant about being HIV positive, listing off a bunch of names of men that she claims to have willingly spread the disease to. The video quickly racked up views, and the police soon received numerous tips about its content. One of the men listed in the video even filed a complaint against her, citing harassing communications. In the video, Brandy is seen saying, "Motherfuckers play with me. I told ya, I'm an evil motherfucker. I'm evil as hell. I get real nasty and evil." Yeah. The police decided it was time to head out and arrest her as she had just admitted to a serious crime. Under Georgia law, where the case took place, it is illegal to knowingly even attempt to spread HIV. It's a felony that punishes with up to 20 years in prison. In the rant, not only did Brandy list the names of the men she claims to have slept with, but also their wives and girlfriends too, implicating herself in as many crimes as possible. She said that she wanted to see these people suffer, ending with, "I always get the last laugh. I'm going to watch y'all die." While the video was removed on Facebook, it had already been shared on various other platforms. Needless to say, people in the area began to panic. Brandy was arrested and taken into custody, looking at some serious charges. In questioning, her story came to appear suspicious, almost unbelievable. They administered her with an HIV test, and she was found to be negative after all. She told them she was simply mad at the people in the video. In the end, Brandy was charged with a misdemeanor count of harassing communications. While she was bailed out of jail that same day, she's looking at up to a year in prison if this case proceeds. So, long story short, while the original urban legend may not have been true down to the most minute details, cases eerily similar have happened on numerous occasions. It's something that is still a definite risk, so all of you out there be very careful with who you decide to take into the bone zone. Once again everyone, thank you for watching my videos. If you found it interesting, please give it a like as it helps me out in the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Just recently, I've started a podcast with a few friends called the NBR Podcast, where we talk about topics similar to these. Give it a listen if you're interested. Go ahead and follow me on social media if you want as well. I always appreciate when people follow me on Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Link in the description below. Channel memberships are back up too, so you can get all the same content there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.